In HOI4, there are many confusing things, for example, doctrines, but in this video, I'll explain all the doctrines and when or how to use them. Starting off, we have our 4 grand doctrines. Grand Battle Plan is the best grand doctrine by far. It gives you more max planning, command power gain, and reinforce rate. This doctrine is done by almost all nations, because it is the best offensive doctrine. The runner-up doctrine is superior firepower, which isn't nearly as good on the offensive, but can be good if only on the defensive. It gives buffs to supply consumption, org, and recovery rate. The third best grand doctrine we have is mobile warfare. It gives mostly nothing bigger stats like planning speed buff or org loss when below 25% and org loss when moving, but it gives one buff which makes it usable on D-Day wall, which is the Spirit of Division Command Quick Improvisation that gives cheaper commander abilities and command power gain. Lastly, we have Mass Assault, which is more or less useless aside from early game rushes, and it won't really be seen at all because it is pretty bad. Next up, we have our 9 infantry doctrines. The best infantry doctrine is Individual Excellence, which is done by all tank nations because of its HP buffs, and it also gives some nice breakthrough buffs. The second best infantry doctrine is Irregulars, which gives a 2 times 50% research buff on support tech, and extra stats on defense, breakthrough, soft attack, and org. It's on all leg infantry, which is really good if you're doing paramob or mass mountaineers as an inf miner. Next up is large unit tactics. It's always a safe pick if you don't know what to do, and is likely the best pick for single player and or casuals. It gives combat width reduction, higher recovery rate, and buffs to soft attack. Also buffs org and breakthrough. The fourth best doctrine is mobile infantry. It gives research buffs to mech and gives crazy org buffs, speed, recovery rate, and soft attack. You also pick this doctrine if you're doing mech wall. Now we have assault infantry. Assault infantry is a good doctrine with its buffs to soft attack, hard attack, org, and breakthrough, and it's done by nations who use marines a lot. Finally, we have people's militia. It's a great doctrine that's really OP with militia spam builds, but it can only really be done on 2 nations, which are Austria and PRC, which is why it's ranked so low because it has such niche use. Now we have the last B tier, which is Great War Infantry. It's honestly not too bad. It gives pretty decent buffs to defense, org, and soft attack, but along with that, it also gives land fort construction speed 25%. So if you want to have some fun and maybe build a big Maginot line, it could be fun to mess around with, but it's not exactly meta. I'm gonna group these last 2 together because they're so bad. Mounted infantry and defensive postures are both bad and will struggle to find use in almost all situations because they either give no stats that are important, or there's just already a better doctrine out there. For the second sub-doctrine column, we have artillery and combat support. Starting off with the best pick, Siege Arty. With its buffs to org, defense, and soft attack, and as a bonus it gives extra railway gun bombardment, so many nations can do this, and it's honestly overall a great pick if you can get it. Mobile recon and assault is another great pick for nations that need high breakthrough, and it also buffs tank destroys hard attack by 10% and gives 3% piercing. The first A tier is anti-tank frontline. With its limited use, it could be lower, but when you do use it, it performs really well. With a 10% heart attack buff on line AT, 20% defense, 20% piercing, and plus 10 org, it is really good for nations that do shield inf. Self-propelled support is another good pick for tank nations, as it gives a 20% heart attack buff on tank destroyers along with org and recovery rate buffs. The only B tier is fire concentration. It could be fun in some line arty troll build due to the many buffs it gives to line artillery, but it also gives 10% AA attack, which makes it really usable in some situations where you're under red air or you're trying to kill a lot of your enemy's gas. The last usable artillery and combat support doctrine is field engineering. Despite some of these stats looking insane, like 100% heart attack or 50% breakthrough, it's actually nothing bigger because it only applies on top of the engineer company. These last 2 are grouped together not because they're similar, but because they can both only be used as troll or are super niche, like the air cavalry for helicopters or flying battery for Katyushas. They work really well at these 2 tasks, but aside from that, they're not really usable. The next sub-doctrine we have is the armor sub-doctrine, which is essential for tank builds. Starting us off, we have the best tank doctrine for multiplayer, which is Tank Destroyer Force, with its buffs to hard attack, making it great against enemy tanks, along with its buffs to Armored Assault Company, making it the strongest tank doctrine. The runner-up doctrine is Mobile Defense. Another great pick for multiplayer. If Armored Assault Company is banned or TD Force is banned, you should be doing this. It gives high heart attack and also defensive buffs to your mech, making it very strong against enemy tanks. Now we have Streamlined Deployment. It isn't as good in multiplayer, but can find use in single player due to its buffs to soft attack and more breakthrough, because soft attack is more important in single player due to the AI being incompetent and not making real tanks. Armored Spearhead is a nothing burger doctrine. It can really only be used if you want tons of breakthrough, as it gives a 40% breakthrough buff on tanks, but aside from that, it's useless. I'm grouping these last two together. Armored Infantry and Armored Cav are both fairly bad, as Armored Infantry support will always have a better doctrine picked and is more or less useless, but Armored Cav could likely be used if you did a light tank build. But aside from that, these doctrines are both horrible. Lastly, for our final sub-doctrine, we have our 8 operations doctrines. Starting off with a no-brainer, the best operations doctrine is Grand Assault. With its 10% planning, 30% breakthrough, AA, coordination, and org buffs, this doctrine is a must-pick for all tank nations. For a strong second place, we have Desperate Defense. With the 5% recruitable being really good for Infanters, it also gives some big soft attack and defensive buffs. Another great pick for Operations Doctrine is Mission Type Tactics, which buffs Org a lot and gives a bunch of recovery rate. So if you can't get Desperate Defense as Inf Miner, this could also work really well. For our first speed tier, we have one of the weirdest doctrines, Guerrilla War. Of course, it's really strong in malicious spam builds, but it also gives really odd buffs, like political power gain, stability, war support, and resistance growth. So even if you're not doing a malicious spam build, it could be really fun to mess around with. For our next doctrine, we have Rapid Domination. It's an okay pick for single player, as it gives a lot of buffs to soft attack, which is way more important than hard attack in single player, but it gets shined out by all the other doctrines here. Infiltration Tactics is just a bunch of stats thrown together, so I don't even need to talk about it. It's pretty bad. Now we have Deep Battle, which due to its super high reinforce rate, it can be done in some niche situations or on some nations, but aside from that, it's useless. So that's why it's ranked so low. Lastly, for the final doctrine, we have Expeditionary Warfare, which is bad at everything it's trying to accomplish, because if you're going to send volunteers, I'd rather send 4 tanks with good buffs than 6 tanks with meh buffs. The only stat here that could find meaning is the 25% shore bombardment. That is the ending to this video. Make sure to tell me what I did wrong or what you want to see next done, and also join my Discord because I am always active.